Today's video is brought to you by our friends at Manscaped.com, the only global men's lifestyle brand that lets me talk about balls before we get into the video. If you followed me for a while, especially since Metal Gear Solid 4, that 4-hour video, you know that I'm a huge fan of Manscaped. I've been using their products for a fair bit, definitely been grooming down there with the old-fashioned lawnmower. Now it's the 4.0, but ladies and gentlemen, something new. Manscaped has launched the beard trimming and styling routine. They got the Beard Hedger Pro Kit. No way, you got a Kimbo action. Now the Beard Hedger has a powerful 7200 RPM motor, like some of your hard drives, and titanium coated T-blades that can cut through the thickest of your hair in a single stroke. Whether you prefer 5 o'clock shadows or a lion's mane, you can choose from 20 different hair cutting lengths, and the zoom wheel that only uses one guard. The beard trimmer is waterproof, cordless, and rechargeable. So yes, you can in fact do this in the shower if you want to multitask and save time, you gamers. We've known that you've been double dipping, and that's really disgusting. Manscaped has also created dermatologist-tested beard care products that help you grow and nourish your beard. The beard oil is infused with sweet almond, sunflower seed, and jojoba seed oil. You can use their shampoo, which is sulfate-free, cruelty-free, paraben-free, vegan-free, and dye-free, so you can't stop talking about it. Nourish your beard with their beard conditioner that's got coconut oil, shea butter, vitamin E. Style the perfect beard with their beard balm that smells amazing. You also get a travel case and a free gift. Simply go to manscaped.com today, get 20% off and free shipping when you use promo code SOG at checkout. That's 20% off plus free international shipping with promo code SOG at manscaped.com. Join over 8 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped daily today. Hello guys and gals, me Mudahar, and today I want to talk about game preservation and why I don't trust most large gaming companies, period. Now to understand, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a preservationist at heart, meaning that I think about video games and how they're going to play 10, 15 years from now. You might be like, but Muda, why do you care? Just play them now and play something new when that comes out. You know, most of the gaming I do these days are older games, okay? Recently, I've been playing through Grand Theft Auto 4, okay? GTA 4, The Lost and Damned, episodes from Liberty City, original. You know why? Because it's a great game. It's a fun, dark story, and I like it. You know, when it comes to older games, I'm playing remakes. Literally, the last big game that I enjoyed was Dead Space, a remake of Dead Space 1. Oh, what am I excited for? Resident Evil 4 remake. It's both depressing and exciting to play video games that I know will just play well, especially knowing that most of the stuff that comes out nowadays isn't exactly exciting. Okay, sure, it might look better, but ultimately, the open worlds of today, in my opinion, don't compare to the open worlds of something like Assassin's Creed 2. These stories don't compare to something like Mass Effect. And maybe I'm just all wrapped up in nostalgia, but you know what? It is what it is. So again, being somebody that plays games that are now considered retro, God, I feel old, I have to ask myself, boy, what does the future landscape look like? And it is not good. Now, if you haven't known, a few weeks ago, we basically had an announcement that Xbox was delisting video games. Now, to understand, delisting happens all the time. A lot of these games get so old that the licenses for things like the in-game soundtrack or even models, vehicles, IPs tend to get lost in the wind, and they have to just effectively be taken away, delisted off a store. So, of course, in, the case of, for example, Grand Theft Auto 4, a lot of the music got removed, but knowing that you can patch the game on PC, downgrade it, or emulate a version of it on the PS3 emulator, or Xenia, which we'll get into later, you can play the game with the OG soundtrack just fine. But of course, the games that got delisted were pretty much bangers like Aegis Wings, the free 200 gamer score everyone got, Assassin's Creed Brotherhood to 4, and Liberation HD. You're not really losing much with this one, but hey, you lost something. Blue Dragon, literally an exclusive game for the Xbox 360, gone. You've got Castle Crashers. Imagine a world where the Xbox Live Arcade doesn't have Castle Crashers. We live in that world now. And then, of course, believe it or not, one of the most important games to me, Lost Odyssey. Now, this one really hits me right in the balls. You know why? Because this is probably one of the best games on the Xbox 360, a true exclusive. It was released well near the beginning of the Xbox's lifespan, and it looked absolutely jaw-dropping. To give you the idea, this is a game from like Mistwalker Studios, so effectively the daddy of Final Fantasy made a classic turn-based JRPG 4-disc banger for the Xbox 360 back in the day. And remember, this is like when the JRPGs on the PlayStation were like final hallway 13, you know? Hey guys, here's a hallway. Let's go all the way to chapter 13 and win. Boom. Sure, Final Fantasy 13 looked nice, and sure, maybe I enjoyed those cutscenes a little bit, but you know, to be honest with you, Lost Odyssey was an absolutely amazing title that I still am glad to own physically on my Xbox 360. And to this day, I'll load it up from time to time just so I can play that amazing story. We're talking about a game that had probably some of the best visuals of its time, the best music score of its time, and in fact, the gameplay holds up. It's a shame to see it suddenly removed off the Xbox Live Store, and I have to believe it's because of licenses, and again, the game just got too old. See, the problem with digital media, and one of the reasons why I don't trust backwards compatibility necessarily on the Xbox, positives. I think it's cool. I think it's amazing that Microsoft allows people to play games from the 360 and the original Xbox on the Series S and X. I think that shit is cool. The problem is, it's not really, in my opinion, proper backwards compatibility. Yeah, you put your disc into the Xbox, but you're effectively downloading an ISO file off of their servers with a specialized emulator onto your system. That doesn't actually mean the game is preserved. It's preserved on Microsoft servers. See, until the internet dries up and goes away, that, if for some example, far off in the near future, when like there's multiple iterations of like whatever feature Xbox is out, at some point servers go down, storefronts get taken down. It's just the reality of life. It could happen to companies like Sony all the way up to companies like Microsoft, which effectively control the internet of large. Eventually things will just get delisted. Whatever remains locked behind company servers never stay forever. You can see this with like Nintendo's eShop, where the 3DS and the Wii U shop effectively are closing down literally next month, meaning that unless you buy those digital games today, you will not be able to buy them for the 3DS or the Wii U, and effectively that avenue of legit game purchasing goes away. You can re-download them, sure, for whatever how long. Now, to understand the real implications of this is a legal channel of the game is gone, meaning that all of a sudden, those retro game sellers are going to price hike these games to no tomorrow because it'll be the only official way to play it. Now, of course, to be honest with you, at this point, my morality index, my ethical index for you downloading a ROM of this game tend to go pretty far down. In my opinion, if you cannot support a company with your own money directly, and if that money is going to like Jim Bob, the reseller at his garage sale, then at that point, the difference between piracy and a used game is non-existent at that point, okay? Simple as that. So again, to go back to it, what is the actual like win in this case? How do you get by this? Since I don't trust companies, one thing that I can trust is things like emulation. But before we get into it, I want to dispel a rumor that I've been seeing floating around in every gaming forum imaginable by some of the dumbest mouth breathers you can ever find. And yes, I am going to use the term mouth breather because this requires literally 5 minutes of fucking research, okay? I want to start off by saying this is one of my favorite comments that's written by people who have no idea what they're talking about, okay? So again, let's start off. Discs have been authentication checks for over a decade. True! You know why? Because it takes one disc, it's got its own little code onto it, you put it into a drive, bam, that's your authentication check. True. But you know why we also use discs? It's because they contain the game data that copies onto an internal hard drive. They even say, modern console gaming, even PC gaming, is nothing but whining, crying, and I'm tired of it. It's nothing but ignorant casuals who don't understand how technology works. Written by somebody that's the cause of I'm not even going to go there. YouTube TOS doesn't allow me. But yeah, absolutely doesn't know how technology works. Read this one. Blu-ray is terrible technology. PS3 and 4 and Xbox One games use Blu-ray. They have to, because in order to get your money, they have to sell you overpriced mediocre components with small hard drives. Now, again, to understand, games are large, and Blu-rays, I'm gonna upgrade this argument to the PS5
Xbox Series, they come with ultra high definition Blu-ray drives, meaning that the drives themselves, the actual discs, can be printed with data up to 100 gigabytes in size. So typically what will happen over here is the game developer will publish this massive title onto a Blu-ray drive, which then you put into your PlayStation or Xbox. It'll copy all of the information required to play the game off of the drive into your system. Yes, you're going to need a disc for authentication, because otherwise people could just pass the disc around like a venereal disease and play the same game off 10 copies that isn't checking whatsoever. So again, to all the Sony fangirls who think Sony is so great for pioneering CDs, guess what? CDs are awful ideal for gaming. The only reason it was ever allowed to get so popular is because of hardware cartridges. Yeah, compared to 64 megabyte cartridges at the time of the N64 versus 700 megabytes or 600 megabytes, I believe, after writing CDRs. Yeah, infinitely better. Led to much better gaming experiences because developers had a lot of room to work with. But of course, if this person asks, production cost would have made games insanely expensive. True, cartridges did add an extra layer of expense, more than they are now. But there's no reason for that anymore. Physical games should be on SD cards or USBs. Again, no fundamental idea how technology works. USBs and SD cards would not dramatically increase speeds. Yes, Blu-ray is slow, but given games nowadays that require running on SSDs, do you want to know how much an SSD would cost with 100 gigabyte storage size passed around? First off, that would increase manufacturing costs because you're literally manufacturing an entire component versus like printing a disc, which costs, by the way, like $5 or $6 maximum. That's if you're doing it in bulk, which most of these distributors are. Again, written by people that have no idea what the technology truly is. These discs, yes, you are not downloading them to your system, you are just installing them. In fact, let's go a step further. I'm going to dispel this rumor in front of everybody right now. This is my PS5. This is a copy of Resident Evil 2 Remake. Now, if I want to play this game on my PlayStation 5 without any internet connection whatsoever, just off the disc, you can prove it right now. I can load it up. I can show you that I'm not connected to the internet. I'm going to put the disc in. It's going to immediately start installing. Now, you might be like, but it says downloading. No, it's not downloading. It's a 23-minute copy period. You can see the first quadrant is literally the ready to play, meaning that this is how much of the game you need to install to launch it and play the initial phase. Then you've got the second quadrant, which is the rest of the game data. Now, a lot of games do this. Red Dead does this. Cyberpunk, you can play the 1.0 version without ever touching a patch, even though I would argue you much need a patch for that game. Now, here I've installed Resident Evil 2, I'm launching it, and you can see the game functions. Now, again, you're not going to have some content that was released in a post-release patch. Obviously, this is the 1.0 gold standard version of the game. So you can play it all the way through from the beginning to the end without ever touching an internet connection, meaning if you have the disc copy of a game, again, most games, unless on the cover they're writing internet required or needs internet, they will function start to finish without any patches or anything. And for the most part, 99% of them work relatively well. Yeah, some patches are going to smooth out the frame rate. They're going to introduce more features. Yes, but they're not critical requirements in most cases to play these games.
A lot of people will say, but Muda, physical discs don't actually have the game on it. You still have to download it. Every time you buy, if I buy God of War Ragnarok on the PlayStation 5, a physical disc, and I put it into my PlayStation 5 without connecting it to the Wi-Fi, to the Ethernet, to the internet, guess what? It installs all 90-something gigabytes off of the Ultra Blu-ray drive, Ultra Blu-ray disc, onto the console's SSD. Sure, it doesn't contain the patches. Sure, it doesn't connect to the internet. Yeah, I might miss some content that's probably released for free through a game patch. But guess what, Einstein? I can play the game from the start button to the credit screen without ever touching a Sony server. That's a big benefit of physical discs. You actually own the game. See, when Resident Evil 4 Remake comes out, I'm gonna buy it on PlayStation 5 because I know as long as the box doesn't say internet required, that means it will be playable from start to the credit screen. Okay, when I whip Salazar with the infinite rocket,
without ever connecting it to the internet. That means that I own that disc. I own that game, okay? No company can take that disc or de-authenticate it away from me. It'll work on any PlayStation 5, okay? That's what I'm getting at. So of course, when it comes to physical discs, as long as we have these games physically preserved, games backed up through obviously legal channels, might I add you, then at least emulators exist. Now, one of the emulators I wanted to really showcase that blows my mind recently is Xenia. Now, I've actually showcased GTA 5, where you can actually use RPCS3 to emulate games like GTA 5. Since then, the development team at RPCS3 even contacted me and told me whatever issues I had in that video have actually, for the most part, been resolved. And yeah, I have finished half of GTA 5 under an emulator. And you know what? The experience is great. Literally 90% less file storage and the same goddamn game. But of course, the Xbox 360 research emulator, Xenia in this case, is one of the things that I wanted to show you. See, right now we live in an age where it's kind of like the emulator wars. You have RPCS3 with Xenia going at it, okay? And in the last few months, Xenia has gotten so updated that it used to be you couldn't even play Fable 2 on this thing. Now you can! So of course, I wanted to run Lost Odyssey through this, and surprisingly, the game is pretty playable. Now, what's really blowing me away is even games like Red Dead Redemption. I loaded up Red Dead Redemption on Xenia, and there is another version of it called Xenia Canary, which allows you to add patches. So I added patches for Red Dead Redemption, and surprisingly, you're able to play the game at 60 frames per second, up the resolution, maybe optimize it even further. Yeah, even games like Grand Theft Auto 4 run perfectly under Xenia as far as my experience goes. There will probably be some graphical bugs. There might be moments where the game may crash occasionally, but guess what? The game still functions. Gears of War 2, a game that has never been released on the PC, is playable on Xenia. One of the most important things for me when it comes to these emulators is ultimately the preservation technology behind them. So of course, again, remember, games like Gears of War 2, as I've just mentioned, have never been released on PC. And it's wild because you can play Gears 4, Gears 1, like through a HD remaster, Gears 5, and you can play those games, but you suddenly can't play Gears 2 and Gears 3, arguably some of the most important Gears of War games. Well, thankfully, due to emulation, and no thanks to Microsoft's help, you can actually do what these companies are not setting out to do. See, one of the things with emulation and delisting video games is ultimately they get taken away, they get removed. And of course, sure, you can download games like Lost Odyssey for now. Who knows when they eventually get completely taken away and there's no recourse. You kind of sign away all of your ownership rights the moment you buy anything digitally. And it always baffles me because when people buy a digital game for full price, when you could get a physical disc as well too, I often cringe why people try not to get the physical discs. I get it, digital is convenient, but you're literally paying the same price to own a key on a server versus actually owning the game files in your hand that you can play without ever touching the internet, for crying out loud. It's wild to me that that is actually a reality we live in. And of course, I always was promised when I was younger that, oh, games going digital, that means they're going to be priced $20 less than the physical disc. Not even true at all. No, game companies literally have charged the price even higher. You don't get any savings with digital. It's not like they pass those on to you. You know, the fact that they don't have to touch a retailer, the fact that they don't have to print discs. What in the right mind did you think gaming companies were going to pass the, pass the savings to you? It doesn't work in any capacity. They weren't thinking of that at all. I also have a real concern, given that the fact that with this generation of consoles, the PS5 and the Xbox Series S in this case, there are versions of the console that are digital only where, yeah, you save $100, but it's sort of the start for these companies to kind of start eliminating the physical disc market entirely. And while I think it's going to be a while before that happens, at the end of the day, there's still so many parts of the world where you need physical discs because they just don't have the download capacities to handle these 100 gigabyte downloads. And in that case, the moment we move away from disc ownership, I might as well just stop caring about video games entirely. Because when it's all down to a system that is ultimately locked off from general use, you ultimately have to rely on these companies' goodwill to preserve these titles going forward. It's one of the reasons why I'm totally against cloud gaming. Yeah, I don't think the technology even is going to be feasible from like, hey, let me play this fighter game with guaranteed latency, so to speak. But also, you can't preserve those cloud games either. Once they're on the server and that service gets taken away, which it usually does, well, surprisingly, you don't have access to the game files themselves to preserve for generations to go forward, which would suck, especially if there's a game worth keeping, you know what I mean? So, of course, going into the world of, Xbox 360 game preservation, I'm glad to say that at least the community who are developing these amazing emulators have went out to not only preserve these games, but inject them with patches, inject them with things like AMD FSR, which allows you to get higher resolutions, with less graphical load, if you will. And of course, you've even got various things like variable refresh rates, the ability to double the frame rate in some cases for these video games, which is a welcome addition. And I'll give Microsoft credit. For a lot of these backwards compatible games that they release, some of them do come with FPS boosts, resolution boosts. But the problem is, because it's tied to their server and their product, you're never going to get these to own forever. Unless these things are released physically and there are proper emulators made for these consoles, they will never truly be preserved. It's one of the reasons why I hate things like de novo DRM, not because it consumes CPU cycles, which may or may not be happening from time to time and dependent on the game. It's literally because those DRMs prevent true, proper preservation of those PC games. Once, things like, once those games are eventually delisted, once those games are eventually forgotten about and they have never been cracked and they still have DRM on them, they'll probably be gone into the wind for the end of time. And of course, not all games are necessarily worth going crazy over. I'm sure there's a lot of titles that we could care less if they're cracked, games like Left Alive. But at the end of the day, software, when DRM locked, when hardware locked like this, going away is a net loss for everybody involved. It's almost a shame knowing that a lot of video games that we know and love are locked down to systems. Games like Lost Odyssey, games like Red Dead Redemption, which are games that you probably shouldn't forget. And if you've never played these two titles, you owe it to yourself to give them a bit of a chance. So again, it's a shame to know that because these games haven't had a PC release, because these games have never truly been released outside of their systems back in the 360 PS3 era, that there may eventually be a generation of gamers who could never play these games. Could you imagine people who play a banger like Red Dead Redemption 2 and they're like, damn, I want to continue the story. But all of a sudden, Rockstar Games has delisted Red Dead Redemption 1 because the source code was so ass that they couldn't actually port the game to PC or these modern generation systems. Well, all of a sudden, your dreams die right there. You miss out on an entire story. Or that would have been the case until, of course, projects like Xenia, RPCS3, and of course, Microsoft, through the Xbox One's backwards compatibility program, actually jumped in to preserve the game. Although with RPCS3 and Xenia, because these are community tools, they're preserved till the end of time. It's also a shame that a lot of good games like Hi-Fi Rush do not have physical releases. I don't know if it'll get one in the future, but again, without any physical releases and tons of DRM caked in, we live in a world where amazing experiences like Hi-Fi Rush, probably game of the year for a lot of people, is sitting there in like literal limbo. Because unless it's cracked, unless there's a physical disc somewhere that people can back up, well, all of a sudden, that banger can get lost to the end of time if there's, just no interest in it, or it just never gets cracked. You get the point. But ladies and gentlemen, this is me, Mutahar. If you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I wanted to make a video covering on our Xenia, because Xenia has blown me away, and, if I gave RPCS3 some love, you bet your ass I'm going to show some love right here. So if you've been wondering, how am I going to play Fable 2 with the boys on PC, or Gears 2, or Lost Odyssey, well, you may not even need an Xbox anymore. You may as well just get by on good old-fashioned Windows 11, God forbid, and Xenia. Anyways, this is me, Mutahar, and if you like what you saw, please like, comment, and subscribe. Dislike if you dislike it. I am out.